All right. So I'm going to welcome the next panel up to the stage for safeguarding the backbone, cybersecurity for essential services. I think this is a really interesting area to to think about how we and the luminaries panel talked about it this morning. How do we actually protect the things that enable our society to continue functioning so that we don't, end up looking like The Last of Us or something like that. So, yes, I know. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, not that Caitlin Clark, but the other one, the more important one who's sitting right here for her to take it away.
I got this now. Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for staying with us. I know we're in the afternoon and I appreciate everyone holding on, and I'm excited to have a conversation about what promises to be timely and important about cybersecurity and essential services. I'm going to start our panel with a little audience participation because I know it's late. How many of you all remember the movie, the 2007 classic film, Live Free or Die Hard? Right? And if you remember, the central plot was a coordinated cyber attack on America's infrastructure, taking power grids, traffic systems, financial markets, all brought to a standstill. And Bruce Willis as John McClane saving us all. How many of you in 2007 thought, oh my God, the director of Underworld has really created another fantasy? I did. But I think what we know now is it is not Hollywood fantasy. It's actually our reality. Cyber attacks on essential services aren't theoretical. They're happening, and their consequences are very real. Whether it's ransomware targeting hospitals, attacks on water treatment plants, or threats to our energy grid, the need for coordinated cybersecurity strategies have never been greater. Today, our panel brings together leaders from across sectors to explore how we can better secure the systems on which we rely every day. We'll talk about the evolving threat landscape, ways in which the public and private sector can collaborate more effectively, and what should we be thinking about to mitigate the risks we face. I encourage you all to ask questions at the end and be engaged in the panel. Again, I know it's the afternoon and I want to make sure everybody stays awake. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to start with introducing our panelists. We have Catherine Candello, a Lumen Fellow on National Security. We have Pat Ford, the America's Cybersecurity VP and CISO at Schneider Electric, and Drew Bagley, the Chief Privacy Officer at CrowdStrike. So Drew, I'm actually going to start with you. So it was about 18 months ago in January of 2024 that then FBI Director Christopher Wray testified that the U.S. intelligence community had observed the Chinese Communist Party target multiple critical infrastructure entities, attacks which could potentially jeopardize the physical safety of Americans. CrowdStrike is in a unique position in the cybersecurity community where you work and support industry across several sectors. From your perspective, how would you describe the current risk landscape that our essential services are facing?
Sure. I think, is this working? It is working. I think we talk a lot about, how much closer we're getting to Q Day, and it should be Live Free or Die Hard Day is the way we're looking at it with your framing. I love that. But I think that if we look at some of the trends that we really have a lot of data for from the past year and a half, really since that observation was made, we can see that a lot of what's gone on is that you have cloud conscious adversaries that aren't just looking at the endpoint, looking at your laptops, your desktops, and your devices, but really taking advantage of cloud infrastructure that we've all migrated to. Of course, definitely attacks have increased on identity infrastructure and whatnot. But a very big, large trend is that over the past few decades, as we've really merged OT and IT together at the seams and really networked the two in many cases, we've also seen that while enterprises have gotten a lot better at protecting IT infrastructure, adversaries, and specifically China Nexus adversaries, have instead tried to move from just focusing on managed devices that we can manage and protect easier to unmanaged devices. And so edge devices, edge routers. So when we think about Vanguard, Panda, also tracked as Volt Typhoon, or Operator Panda also tracked as Salt Typhoon. And we think about a lot of the other infrastructure-based infiltrations we've seen. A lot of this really is the form of adversary pre-positioning. And some of it, of course, is espionage carried out for purposes of mapping more infrastructure. Some of it's espionage for purposes of, the exact infrastructure they're attacking. But large scale, I think the way we should think about this is using the live free or die hard, and all of us putting on our John McClane hats, is thinking about and accepting this notion that our critical infrastructure is actively a target, and one where even if we harden one area, then adversaries will move to a softer area. And we should constantly be thinking about what that is, and how we have visibility into that risk, and whether or not we have visibility into that risk.
So earlier today, in our Cyber Luminaries panel, Josh Corman talked about understanding who's after us, what are they exploiting, and how are they acting. If you were in the seat of, let's say, a hospital system, like, how would you answer those questions? How can we help the essential services really understand those critical questions?
Sure. I think you can break it down into a few paradigms. So one is, of course, whether you're dealing with a resourced entity or an unresourced entity. And then another one is to kind of think about the layers of what you need to defend against. So everybody's setup is going to obviously look different, but there are going to be some commonalities where you need to ask yourself whether or not you have visibility into the network layer, and if you're defending it, the endpoint layer, the identity layer, and the cloud layer. But importantly, thinking about what are the devices where you can't manage them directly, um, and where are they interfacing with those networks, such as at edge device points, and really ask, can you extract logs? And then can you get those logs married to the data you're getting from the other sources? Because you're going to invariably have timestamps that you can pivot off of, or today, really like an AI powered SOC can pivot off of, that do tell a story. So even if you say, this router, I can't install the same software on it I'd install on my endpoint, that doesn't mean you can't actually use it as an early detection system, figure out what's going on. Same thing with older protocol infrastructure that we have. So I think that's one thing in a hospital, where you're going to have a mix of devices that have been networked that maybe weren't built with zero trust in them, or built with a mechanism to protect them directly, but that doesn't mean you can't protect them on the network. And then secondly, that paradigm between resourced and unresourced is, there's a big difference between a large hospital provider that maybe can really make meaningful investments in enterprise security and also have the team to support it, and smaller entities that can't. And one of the things that I think is a very positive development of the past several years is we have many, both local as well as even sector specific MSPs that can buy software licenses at large, and provide them to smaller entities, but more importantly, can actually manage them and run them. So when we think about things that we always talk about with regard to threat hunting, and especially when we're talking about state actors, you need to be actively threat hunting. Or when we talk about actively even looking for vulnerabilities or patching quickly and things like that, if you have managed service providers doing that for the small entities, then even small entities can really have that world-class protection. One of the gaps there is, of course, funding to get those MSPs. So that's the public gap.
All right, so we'll keep funding on our back burner here for a moment, as I think we've talked about all day. We're here under the guise of the government shutdown, so I think we'll just put that on the.
So too soon to mention funding.
Too soon to mention.
Okay.
I do want to pivot to Pat. We just talked about the intersection of IT and OT, which is something that Pat and I had the opportunity to talk about for a long time out at RSA on a podcast. But plug for Pat and I talking about OT. But we know that threat actors exploit vulnerabilities, and there's really been a push to look at secure by design to minimize classes of vulnerabilities. But I've heard you talk a lot about secure by operations. Can you give us a sense of what that really means in the kind of umbrella of secure by design? Is it the same, or how do you look at it?
It's a little different, but I want to thank you for being here, and good to see you again after RSA, and thank Venable for being here. But so everybody knows what secure by design is. It's the OEMs when they're developing product and they're developing software or hardware. You know, you have different frameworks that you follow. You know, secure development lifecycle, 62443 4-1, whatever. But then the product gets sold, and it's out in the market. It gets installed and it's in the market. Security is always, the way I look at it, the way we look at it, it's a team sport. There's a whole life cycle for that product. When it's so in its operation, it needs to be secured. So from the time it leaves an OEM to the time, and we're trying to use really the best practices and the mindset in the secure by design principles, and transfer it over to a secure by operation concept. And so when the product gets shipped, where it gets sold to a partner or an end user, there's really a relationship between those three partners: the OEM, the integrator that installs it, and the asset owner who manages it at the end. And what we're secure by operation really is the function of how the security works between all three during its whole life. So an OEM will create a vulnerability management program, right? And we patch products out in the market, but guess what? We learn about them through our customers, or we learn about them through researchers, the vulnerabilities, or our own research through scanning. Well, we've asked our OEMs and we've asked our partners, we've asked our asset owners and our partners is let us know, and be looking for those patches so that you can secure the product. We want to make sure that the OEMs are providing information to the integrators on how to install our products properly, so it's not being, it's not facing the internet. We see a lot of our products facing the internet that were never designed to face the internet. Using Modbus and BACnet, not a good idea to have it accessible to the internet. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But so really, it's the relationship between the three. And so we want our asset owners who, to have that patch cycle. I'd look for and have intelligence about the products that they manage and they own, that when a patch is available, they're looking for it and they install it.
So again, this morning we talked a little bit about, and the cyber luminaries, they talked a little bit about how engineering solutions might be an overall solution to some of the threat environment that we're facing, that maybe it's not a cyber defender, but maybe it's an engineering solution. I know Schneider has been working on a program to reduce OT risk. You talked about your devices internet facing. I think it's called install-based security. Can you tell us about that program and how it fits into the secure by operations?
Sure. It's called the Install Base Initiative. If anybody not hear of it before, I imagine most of you might not have. But anyway, what we're doing is we're trying to identify the Schneider products, and I'll tell you how it started really first. Is when a customer calls and says, "Hey, our product's not working," and it's like, "Well, why is it not working?" And you go to help them, you realize it was facing the internet and maybe an adversary attacked it, and maybe even hit it with ransomware. So when that happens, it kind of hurts our brand because the customer is a little upset about it, but it also might disrupt the infrastructure, the critical infrastructure. So what we've done is we worked with a company called BitSight. If you're familiar with BitSight, they scan, they do the scoring. We worked with them. We've given them access to our laboratories where our products are, so that they can develop digital footprints of our products. Then they scan, looking for that facing the internet. So that's our initial, acquiring data as far as, assets facing the internet, which really shouldn't be. And then we supplement that with what we know about the vulnerabilities or the exposures, previous risks, CVSSs. We know our products and where they sit in our customer, for the most part, where they sit in the critical nature of our customers. And we've worked with CISA, which has been, one of these, and I came from the federal government, and everybody talks about public-private partnerships. This is one public-private partnership that really works really, really well. And I tell this to the CISA leadership because it's something that we're hoping to expand. But we work with CISA because this is a global project, but we work with CISA because they have administrative subpoena power. Most of these devices, when we come back and we identify the asset owner, it comes back to an IP, comes back to a telco. In the 2% that don't come back to a telco, I make the effort. I try to find the asset owner, look for the CISO, and I explain to them exactly what we found. We found this device on this IP address with this version, and we help them try to, identify it, and then ideally help them secure it from the internet. Working with CISA, they have a similar program in their vulnerability management. But as I said, 98% of these come back to telcos. So they use their administrative subpoena process. They validate what we've told them. They validate that the device is still facing the internet. They validate the protocols that we've identified, and then they serve an administrative subpoena on the telcos to get the subscriber information. Who was the IP assigned to? Then they make the notifications to the asset owners. We help them with their notifications, the documentation about why it shouldn't be facing the internet. We help them with how to secure it, how better to secure it. And then since the start of this program, we started at about May of 23. At that time, if you were to ask CISA, they would have said, and again, they were doing a similar program. They were getting about a 10% remediation rate. So for every 10 they went out, one company remediated. They're up to about 50% now, which is really good. Now my goal is 90, and CISA laughs at me. Everybody laughs at me when but remediation is the key. I'd also like to, if the FBI came to your company right now and they said, hey, we have an IP address that we think you need to go look at. Everybody knows what that means, right? Everybody knows you've got an active intrusion. I'd love for when CISA, and some people don't even know who CISA is. Some companies, when CISA comes out and knocks on your door, they don't even know who CISA is. But when they knock on the door and they say, hey, look, we have this IP address that's facing the internet that shouldn't, they'd know exactly how to respond to that and take it just as seriously. So this past year, working with CISA, we've done a lot of public speaking, especially in the water industry. What we found is water's number 2. Believe it or not, energy is number 3 when it comes to critical infrastructure facing the internet that shouldn't be. Number 1's commercial properties. But so a lot of time and effort spent for awareness.
You just got my question about like what were some of the challenges. What are some of the challenges you faced when rolling out this program, other than people not really knowing what to do when somebody comes knocking?
A lot of these companies, and even like especially in water, wastewater, the same guy that manages security is cutting the grass on Thursday. Okay, so it's an OT experience, an OT security experience. It's finding the right person within the company. When I rolled this program out, everybody might know who SINET is. The different CISOs belong to SINET. I rolled this out to them about 18 months ago, and they said, Pat, no one's going to listen to you. I said, I'm really persistent. I said, I'm really persistent. I want to make sure I get to the right person. And that was a challenge. Even finding the CISO. Look, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn and I'm very public about that, because if you have a question about Schneider Electric, I want you to find me. There are companies that you cannot find the CISO. They just hide because they get inundated. And I know I do. I get inundated with sales pitches. But I'm also the point of contact when you have an issue. So I don't hide whatsoever. And so finding them can be a challenge.
Okay, so I've got funding on the back burner. I have we need to try to get more CISO's contact information as a way ahead, so we can know who our points of contact are in essential services when we identify vulnerabilities. I'm going to move on to something else that we discussed earlier today, Catherine. Catherine and I met. I'm going to go back a little bit here. Catherine and I met while working on some work related to the National Cyber Incident Response Plan back in 2015, 2016 time. I was at FEMA. We were focused a lot at the time on planning and preparedness. Really, that's what we were doing. And I know thus far, we've had Drew talk about the threat environment. Pat has outlined some efforts in OT space, but I want to talk about more of the resilience space of resilience as being foundational to the cybersecurity of essential services. So given the environment that we've talked about, that there is increased targeting on edges and of essential services, be it for disruption or espionage, how is the communication sector approaching cyber protection response and really continuity planning?
Well, I will put it this way, and I'm speaking sort of in my role as the vice chair, longstanding vice chair of the Sector Coordinating Council for Communications. I'm not saying that Lumen doesn't do the same stuff, but I'm speaking broadly. I will just say that last January, when directors Easterly, Ray, Mr. Coker, and then General Nakasone did their living off the land briefing, it was a yes, finally we can talk about this. And it was the impetus for many of us within the sector who had sort of known this was bubbling, to have it publicly stated that, no, this is bad. They are I always use the word infested, which is gross, but I think it gets the message across, for us to sort of take more visible action as a sector. So we were particularly concerned that given the extensiveness, the pervasiveness, not just us, but everything that and the fact that the bad guys were in essence doing it to sort of not only wreak civil havoc and chaos, but could definitely impact our ability to respond, that really had gone behind sort of the nutcracker, hacker, what we're talking war, we're talking conflict. And so it gave us an opportunity as a sector to sort of reassess sort of our protection, detection, kind of activities associated with conflict. I don't know if you guys realize this, but as a nation, we have not had conflict in our borders for more than 150 years. So I got to tell you, the business continuity texts are a little light on that, a little light. So I thought what I would do briefly is just to give you a sense of what we have been doing over the past now, I guess, year and a half, just to give you a sense of how one backbone, because there are many backbone infrastructures that keep this country running. Now, I mean, I know I'm a backbone, but the energy folks, the transportation folks, they're backbones too, and they're what keep the nation running. I thought what I'd do is sort of give you a sense of sort of what we as a sector have done and what we've been focusing on. Walking out of that initiative, we decided we were going to be focusing on sort of doubling down on the detect and protect within our own domains, communication domains. But we also needed to think about the possibility, probability, likelihood, concept, of what if there really was a very, very bad day. And so we wanted to focus on, what would be the incident response for that. So on sort of so what are we doing within the sector? I think we have some of the most deepest sort of information sharing mechanisms in our sector. Talk about a double down on that. And many of the reports and analogies and alerts that you've gotten that are under, various departments and agencies within the US government, the ones with Netherlands and Australia and the UK. This was in essence sort of us and other partners in the ecosystem doing a double down on the information that we're looking for and the threat hunting to be able to feed it so that you could, in essence, get the alerts. So doubling down on that. We've also spent a lot of time sort of trying to now make it more public about what does it mean to be in a conflict situation. You might have known that there were statutorily required, sector risk assessments that had to be done last year. And so out of all the scenarios, we put in 5 that had never been touched before that were dealing with conflict. And we were using that to expose gaps, not only within our own sector, but with other sectors and what we would need to address. Certainly on the how do you lock down your own stuff, I've got a list of 10 separate things that we've always been doing. It wasn't like we weren't doing it, but were we really doubling down? Everything from like, well, if we normally patch with an X amount of time because we had to reverse engineer it, well, we will put more resources on it and we will do it faster. Still not like a click the button, but doing that sort of thing, log reviews, and up to more sort of like current things where we're trying to, for instance, leverage some of the new AI capabilities to be able to support us in our terms of network, search, hunt, threat, whatever kind of thing. So that's on the detect protect side. Okay. We're going to try and lock it down so that, if someone tries to whack us, we're standing. There we go. Now let's look at the incident response. And because, we started out this way, it's all about incident response.
Incident response.
I think you may be aware that, they've been rewriting the 10-year-old NCIRP, and it's out for review, and it does not address industry. I'm being harsh, but it doesn't. It's all about what's government going to do about government. Well, folks, if bad guys are whacking our water systems, our transportation systems, comms, energy, God bless DOE, but I don't think he can fix it. God bless CISA. I don't think they can fix my networks, and I don't think EPA can fix. So the fact that we aren't there in that NCRP is sort of, disappointing. So to that end, we have focused a lot on 3 areas, again, within the sector, with government, and then with, other sectors. Within the sector, for the last year and a half, our chief information security officers have been meeting on a regular basis. It's not just the top 10, it's also the big guys internationally, like the BTs and the Canadians. And so, they're putting their heads together, just if nothing else. They knew each other, but, to have sort of a regular cadence, interesting. We've also, in the process and actually made a new communications cyber ISAC. We're calling it Cyber Communications ISAC, C2 ISAC. We are still part of the regular comm ISAC, which is very, very much focused on emergency support function 2 and hurricanes and disasters and wildfires and panics and famine, those sort of things. We're still very much focused on that, but we are putting together the C2 ISAC to, in essence, codify and solidify the existing information sharing that's been going on amongst us. And in cross-sector, we have been doing work for 10 years with the finance and the energy sector. And so through this environment, and recognizing that they give a damn about potential conflict and that they're grown up enough to be able to put resources to it, we've also been going through these types of scenarios. We do have we call it a response plan, but it's sort of a, how do you know you need to convene? Because I think if we were in a really bad situation and there's just not enough of anything to fix everything, I want to hear from our energy folks and I want to hear from the finance folks as sort of exemplars of what else I might need to put into place. So what does all that mean? Well, I'm not only doing that, communication sector is not only that, but I know that the energy folks are, I know the finance folks are, I know the water folks to the degree, everyone's doing it to the extent they can to detect, protect, and to sort of think about incident response. The bigger question is, are you thinking about it? Are you thinking about conflict? If there is a conflict and it's pandemonium, is your company prepared? So I think there is going to be a lot of words written and analysis done, and the business continuity folks will have new things to consider, particularly over the next year and a half. And I'll turn it back over to you.
So I want to pick up on some of the things you said there. You talked about cross-sector and multiple sectors needing to think about how to I'm putting words into your mouth, but like how to limit the consequences to operations if there's a really bad day. You're really trying to maintain some operations during a really bad day, even during conflict, so you're not hard down for a long time. It was said earlier this morning that sector by sector, there's some good work done, but there perhaps challenges when you go across the sectors, and that there is still a lack of coordination across the and I'm going to use the backbone. We're saying essential services. I've heard, critical functions. God forbid we have like 17 different terms for the same things, community lifelines. How do you envision, where do you think policymakers in this administration used to focus on when it comes to that cross-sector planning for disruption during conflict?
I know the Cyber Commission coined the continuity of the economy kind of phrase, which also has 50 different definitions. Okay, but I'm trying to get to the gist of, DOD can't project force if he doesn't have water and power at choose your base. Okay, I mean, that's a hard down. And I know they've got generators, and I know they have batteries, but how long do they last? And do they last long enough for them to actually project force? So where we've been approaching it and we're crawl walking as quickly as we can is to be able to start teasing that out pulling out the, unpeeling the onion, if you will, to be able to understand what are the sort of things we need to consider. What we're coming down to is what are your most essential functions. That's what you've got to like triple down on your own detect, protect kind of stuff. But also you need to let the people that you're relying on know that of all the damn things that I'm providing you, these are the things that I've really got to work on, and to work in a mutual sort of basis to say, what can I do to sort of mitigate, work around, get diversity, redundancy. That is a long dialogue, and that's 1,000 dialogues between 1,000 providers to a different 1,000 providers. So I can understand that government is struggling with it. I get that. But what we have, as industry, and sort of our early discussions, not only with sort of government writ large, but sort of on the DoD space, please, a lot of us are cleared. Tell us what are your most important things. They used to have them outlined, primary mission essential functions, and you would move from there. But that hasn't been updated in about 15 years. So I don't know if it exactly they're in place now.
So I want to pull some of the threads on what we've heard from the panelists today before I open it up for questions. Heard we need to focus on some continuity planning and thinking about it from a mindset of continuity planning during conflict. And what does that really mean? And are our plans considering those kinds of scenarios? I'm hearing that we need to, it sounds like the comm sector is working on that. Let's meet all the CISO's challenge that Pat has identified, but bringing that further. You talked, Pat, about a good partnership between your install base initiative and CISA, which I think is an example of public-private partnerships. What would your recommendation be to private? You talked about wanting to expand it. What would your recommendation to policymakers be about looking at effective public-private partnership?
All right, that's a new.
Sorry, that's a hard question.
That's okay. I have to think about that one a second. Number one, transparency and trust. It's built over time. I mean, it works because of transparency and trust. And it took time. Okay, when we first started, we met initially. It was like, well, we can't give you that. And I came from the government, so I know what they could give us a little bit of. And it took time to develop that trust. And I'd say about a year into it, we were in the crawl phase initially, and now we're kind of like, we're kind of like standing erect now and walking pretty good. We're not running because the volume's not there yet. There are 150,000 devices globally facing the internet with the protocols that we're looking at that are Schneider Electric protocols, and they're used by other companies too. But my grandkids are gonna be working this stuff if we don't go faster. Okay.
And I think Drew talked about it earlier. Live Free or Die Hard date is 2027, which is right around the corner.
Yeah. So we don't want to be doing this that long. So we need to scale. We need to automate. So funding for that would be great. Bringing in additional OEMs, which we're doing. We're bringing in. It's not a Schneider problem. It's an internet facing problem, and a lot of OEMs products facing the internet. And I've talked to other OEMs, but other OEMs that said, Pat, we last year at RSA, someone gave a speech on this. One of my colleagues, and we were approached by an OEM, and they said, we had this program. We did this like a year ago. We had zero remediation. How are you guys getting remediation, even without CISA? I said, we're persistent. Like I said, I'm like a dog on a bone. When I was a tax accountant in my early life, my partner said I was like a pit bull because I never put down an issue until I solved it. And it's just the way I am. But so it's persistence. Policy would be, look, I don't know exactly, but for me, it's making it more well known and getting additional. Well, there is one area. So CISA initially also said that, look, we can't share this subpoena information with other federal agencies. And I said, well, gee, that's like goes against what happened after 9/11. You're supposed to share this information, but it was subpoenaed information, so they couldn't do it. And because we want to bring in other government agencies But for instance, Department of Energy, if we find an energy company, I want to CC the energy company. I want to CC DOE. I want to CC EPA when it goes out to a water company or a wastewater company. So bringing in additional resources to do this would be important, and then leveraging automation, which would help a lot.
Thanks. Drew, I'm not going to let you off the hook either. What would your ask of policymakers be as you're looking at the risk to essential services right now?
Sure. I mean, I think we need to act with urgency to make sure that the cyber have-nots get resourced with MSPs, because I think from a technical standpoint, we have solutions. We do have managed service providers, we have technology, we have those solutions, but you really have to get those, especially to the water treatment facility that doesn't even have a full-time IT person, much less security person. So I think that's really important. And not to think about, no matter which name we use, that all critical infrastructure even looks similar within one industry, much less across industries, of course. But then also, I think we really need a national capacity for incident response. A couple of years ago, that was something I was pushing during congressional testimony, even when we were looking at how do we better resource CISA or set up CISA, for the future. And that's something where I think we really need that, because if we assume that you have nation state adversaries pre-positioning, if you assume there's going to be a kinetic conflict, or at least a kinetic choose your own adventure in the South China Sea in the next 2 years, then you really have to ask, what do we have to mitigate against being completely distracted at home, or having Live Free or Die Hard at home without John McClane?
Without John McClane, no Bruce Willis.
And I think that we really need that incident response capacity, because if you invest in that now, then whether you're talking about, and I think frankly, you're going to have a bunch of private sector partners doing this, multiple, but you're going to have people investing today, doing the hiring and being prepared to be on call for that sort of ramp up. And so picture if you had, 12 WannaCry type things at once or something, plus a Log4j, plus a SolarWinds, et cetera. How would we mitigate that? And that's what I think we have to be asking ourselves. And then fundamentally, I think everybody within their own networks, since we now know adversaries have, moved on from, smash and grab with managed devices to unmanaged devices, just ask the basic question, do I have visibility into these devices or not? And if I have visibility, am I mitigating it? By analogy to Die Hard 1, John McClane's climbing through the air conditioning shafts. He's getting visibility. He's peeking through. He's using mirrors and everything else to get that visibility. And that's what we need.
Yep. All right, we're going to open up to the audience if there's any questions, and bonus points if you can make reference to any other Die Hard movies. All right. Go for it, Alan.
Reference here, Sorry, thank you for that one. Just for the easy reference here, don't forget John McClane's key partner in the original was state and local. Love it. So can we start talking about
Reginald Val Johnson? Yes.
Exactly. Is there any, I guess, top lesson learned, as a sign of improvement or a lesson learned from engagement with our critical on the ground partners?
Have you guys, turn it to the panel on your interaction with state and local governments as you've been thinking through these challenges?
So for this project, we haven't done it yet, but it's on the horizon. We see them like the state agencies as being something that's vital to the success. But great point. And we don't want the FBI in helicopters crashing, right? So yeah, it would be good.
The analogy that keeps on giving. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think that's a brilliant point and even more brilliant analogy. But I think fundamentally they have the relationships, right? So that's probably the most valuable component, rather than the resources, is actually just having those relationships and then figuring out, because when we have any crisis, any incident, whether it's one of our clients calling us on a Friday afternoon because they've been popped and looking to use our incident response services, or whether we're talking about these nationwide sorts of things, one of the fundamental things you're trying to figure out is coordination and who to call and all that. And that's where I think the state and local partners are fundamental. And you have to answer, is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Okay.
We're getting vertical head nods on that. All right. Any other questions? Oh, Nick. I know. I have faith in Nick Leiserson to. Yep.
My question is on one of our essential services comms and the policy response to SALT. Because we've seen a lot of operational response, and we saw a very manifold, many seal advisory at the end of August of here are all the challenges. We've seen less on the policy response to SALT, which I think contrasts with other gigantic espionage incidents in 2020 and 2015. So just curious from where you sit, are you like happy that this is staying more at the operational level, or should there be more of a response from policymakers?
If it were a simple legislative do button, I'd say yay, but there isn't. It's very, very, very complicated. And I'm not speaking just on comms. I'm talking about all of the sectors. So to say, how do you fight against a nation state and what can I regulate, legislate, pontificate on? The answer is, well, you can pontificate, legislate, and regulate all you want, but will it be effective? And I don't think anyone's found a very good mechanism to provide support, help, assistance, which would be particularly effective across the incredibly wide diversity of backbone sectors who might be implicated by nation state implications. So I haven't seen anything that was particularly helpful, although renewal of CISA 2015 might be nice, and maybe bringing back the CPAC kind of advisory capability so you can engage would be, I think, helpful. But that's not been sort of legislative. That's sort of more on the administrative side.
All right, Peter, I think.
Yeah, to go a little bit farther on that, when we talk about CVE, this is a problem for most nation states. They talk about, well, this is a national critical infrastructure protection problem set, and you stall. I'm warning it in the National Incident Response Plan that allowed, like with the administrative subpoenas, a way to do that coordination. So you could talk to multiple agencies and or industries required underneath some aegis. I'll leave that open because I don't know enough about it to do that. But is there a way to crack that? Because otherwise, you find all your OEMs, to use Pat's term, it's whack the moles, and we're out here with then poor user community trying to whack all moles because they don't know where to go. And we need to prioritize how we approach this, because I agree with that. This is the problem. We've seen this for 20 some years. How do we get past this point? Because we haven't done it with the ISAC yet. Not fully. We've done it in this sector, but not cross sector. And that's where the problem is at.
The closest analogy that I've seen in sort of, I'm going to call it, we call it the poly crisis. And when we're doing with the tri-sector, because it's just a mess, it's a mess, multiple regions, multiple sectors, multiple problems, blah, blah, blah. What we're finding, and once again, we're at the fast crawl stage, because I think it's a big ball to unwrap, ball of yarn to unwrap, is that you do need to have mechanisms, let's say ISACs, where you can get a snapshot point of view of, okay, bad thing has happened. Who's up, who's down, what's working, what's not working within your space? What are your biggest priorities? And let's say it's Illumina. Well, my top priorities are A, B, and C, and Verizon's might be D, E, F, and blah, blah, blah. And then you have to stop and you go, okay, there's not enough to do all of that. This is not like a tornado in the Southeast or a hurricane in the Southeast where I can bring in trucks and people and stuff from the Midwest. Can't do it. There's just mess everywhere. To be able to sort of say, with some level of credibility, these are the top 3 priorities for Lumen writ large, to be able to keep things running. You have to be able to sort of adjudicate that within the sector. Okay, well, maybe I'm not 1, 2, and 3. Maybe I'm number 4, 5, and 6, but I'm still in the top 10. And then you need to stop and you need to sort of bounce that up against other sectors. What are your top 3 priorities? What are yours? What are yours? What are yours? And that's what we're practicing right now in the tri-sector space. We're practicing that so that we can then get a combined, if you will, not only
I think
an
Josh
operational
Corman
picture,
called this a
but also
ruthless prioritization this morning.
ruthless prioritization, but also an informed prioritization, so that I know that things are going to get dropped, but I'm doing with whatever resources I've got, I'm doing the best I can with the combined resources to support the most people, which I think is sort of based in kind of the FEMA Samaritan law. That's the approach.
So just real quick on, we do cyber exercises over 2 days at Schneider. And I've done 2 of them more recently in the last couple of years anyway, with FBI, CISA, and customers. So, but it's not at a national level. When I was in the government, and this was a while ago, but we used to do top off 3, or, I was involved in top off 3. Do they still
So
do
was
top
I.
offs?
No, it's called national level exercise.
Okay. So I was
Rebranded.
rebranded. Okay. I'm shows you my age, but anyway, I was a crisis management coordinator in the FBI, and we did top off 3 was my last one. And the White House gets involved, the DoD gets involved, so they don't do that anymore. That's what they need to do. I would hope that they do it at a.
There was a cyber scenario scheduled during COVID, and then that dropped.
They spend a lot of money on this. I mean, these are expensive. These are top off 3 took like 7 months to plan, and so
I remember that one. I've got the Christmas ornament on my tree for top off 3. I think some of the somebody's laughing. I have that.
The Christmas ornaments are the
DC
best.
Christmas ornament.
I have
Yeah.
NGA, FBI, got everything on
Yeah.
the 3.
So I just want to thank everyone for your time this afternoon thinking through this. I've heard ruthless, I think getting back to some of the themes we've heard today, ruthless prioritization and understanding what priorities are and where they stack across cross-sector. Focus on cross-sector might be necessary, and not might be is necessary. Continuing to build that cadre of CISOs so that we can have the trust relationships, because again, 2027 is not that far away. And then looking at how can we pool some of our, develop the resources and pool some of the services that might be needed at smaller places before we get to that. Because again, none of us are John McClane. One man alone. In the movie, one man alone could fix it, but we know that that's not the case. Thank you guys for your time. We'll see you later.